A wealthy antique dealer's obsession with preserving beauty led to the most disturbing murder case detectives had ever encountered. 4 victims, 4 crime scenes, and one chilling connection that would expose a killer's twisted desire for eternal perfection. Have you ever been so passionate about collecting something that it consumed your thoughts? Maybe vintage coins, rare books, or family heirlooms? Do you know someone whose hobby became an unhealthy obsession? What happens when that passion crosses the line from innocent collecting to something far more dangerous? In October 2023, Detective Maria Rodriguez received a call that would haunt her career forever. Wealthy collectors across the city were being found dead in their bedrooms, surrounded by antique music boxes playing haunting melodies. No signs of forced entry. No obvious motive. Just peaceful-looking victims and the sound of mechanical dancers spinning endlessly in the darkness. But this wasn't random violence. This was the work of someone who believed beauty should be preserved forever, no matter the cost. What drove a respected member of the community to commit these calculated murders? How did investigators crack a case where the killer seemed to vanish like a ghost? And what dark secret connected all the victims to a mysterious estate sale that happened months before their deaths? Before we dive into this investigation, make sure to hit that like button if you're ready for a story that will keep you on the edge of your seat. And don't forget to subscribe with notifications on, because trust me, you won't want to miss how this twisted tale unfolds. The answers to these questions reveal a truth more disturbing than anyone could have anticipated. A truth about obsession, preservation, and the deadly lengths one man would go to create his perfect collection. This is the story of the Music Box Murders, and how one detective's determination exposed a killer's most horrific secret. Detective Maria Rodriguez had seen her share of unusual cases in her 15 years with the Metropolitan Police Department. But nothing could have prepared her for what she discovered on that cold October morning when the first call came in. The victim was Dr. Alexander Hartwell, a 58-year-old antiquarian who owned one of the city's most prestigious auction houses. His housekeeper found him in his master bedroom, lying peacefully on his 4-poster bed as if he'd simply fallen asleep. But the scene around him told a different story entirely. Surrounding Dr. Hartwell were 12 antique music boxes, each one open and playing a different haunting melody. The mechanical dancers spun endlessly, their tiny faces painted with expressions of eternal joy that felt deeply unsettling in the presence of death. What made this case particularly baffling was the complete absence of violence. No signs of struggle. No forced entry. The security system hadn't been triggered. Dr. Hartwell appeared to have died of natural causes, except for one crucial detail that the coroner discovered during the autopsy. Traces of a rare paralytic agent were found in his bloodstream. Not enough to kill him, but enough to render him completely immobilized while remaining fully conscious. The actual cause of death was cardiac arrest brought on by extreme psychological trauma. If you're finding this case as disturbing as I am, go ahead and hit that like button. And make sure you're subscribed because this story gets much darker before we find the truth. 3 weeks later, the second victim was discovered. Margaret Chen, a wealthy art collector known for her extensive collection of Victorian dolls. Same bedroom setup. Same music boxes. Same mysterious cause of death. The only difference was a single red rose placed deliberately on her nightstand. By the time the third victim was found, renowned collector James Morrison, the police knew they were dealing with a serial killer unlike any they'd encountered before. This wasn't about money or revenge. This was about something far more twisted, the desire to preserve beauty forever. The killer was escalating. Each crime scene became more elaborate, more theatrical. The music boxes increased in number. The arrangements became more complex. And most disturbing of all, the victims showed signs of having been conscious for hours before their hearts finally gave out from sheer terror. But it was the fourth victim that changed everything. Because this time, the killer made a mistake that would lead Detective Rodriguez down a path she never expected, straight into the heart of a decades-old obsession that had finally turned deadly. The fourth victim was found on a Tuesday morning that would haunt Detective Rodriguez for years to come. Thomas Blackwood, 62, lay in his bedroom surrounded by 24 music boxes, double the number from the previous scene. But this time, something was different. Pinned to his silk pajamas was a handwritten note on vintage paper. Detective Rodriguez, you're getting close to understanding my art. But can you appreciate true beauty before the final performance? The last dance begins soon. Rodriguez immediately called in her partner, Detective Kevin Walsh, and the forensics team. As they processed the scene, a pattern began to emerge that no one had noticed before. Each music box wasn't just randomly placed, they were arranged in a specific formation that resembled a ballroom dance floor. Look at this, Walsh said, pointing to the arrangement. It's like he's recreating some kind of grand ballroom. But why? The forensics team discovered something even more chilling. Hidden compartments in several music boxes contained tiny photographs, images of all 4 victims taken weeks before their deaths. Someone had been watching them, studying them, planning their deaths with meticulous care. The breakthrough came when Rodriguez decided to investigate what connected all 4 victims beyond their wealth and collecting habits. After hours of cross-referencing financial records, she discovered they had all attended the same estate sale 6 months earlier, the Whitmore Estate auction. The Whitmore Estate had belonged to Edmund Whitmore, a reclusive collector who had died under mysterious circumstances. His mansion had been filled with thousands of antiques, including the largest private collection of music boxes in the country. What if our killer was at that auction too? Rodriguez asked Walsh as they drove toward the now empty Whitmore mansion. What if he saw these people buying pieces of a collection he believed should have stayed together? The Whitmore Estate sat on the outskirts of town, a Gothic Victorian mansion that looked like something from a horror novel. The windows were boarded up, and the grounds had been left to grow wild since the auction. But as they approached the front door, Rodriguez noticed something that made her blood run cold. Fresh tire tracks in the driveway. Someone had been here recently. Inside the mansion, their flashlights revealed empty rooms stripped bare by the estate sale. But in what had once been the main parlor, they found evidence that someone had been using the space. Candles, recent food containers, and most disturbing of all, a makeshift workshop filled with music box parts and repair tools. On a dust-covered table, they discovered a leather-bound journal filled with meticulous notes about each victim. Their daily routines, their security systems, their collecting habits, everything the killer needed to plan the perfect murders. But it was the final entry that made Rodriguez's hands shake as she read it aloud. The collection must be reunited. Beauty must be preserved. The detective will understand when she becomes part of the final display. This is where the case took a turn that even experienced detectives couldn't have predicted. If you want to hear how Rodriguez caught this killer before becoming his next victim, make sure to stay until the end of this video. Trust me, the conclusion will shock you. As Rodriguez and Walsh searched the mansion, they realized they weren't alone. Somewhere in the darkness, classical music began to play, the same haunting melodies found at each crime scene. The killer was here, and he was ready for his final performance. The hunt was about to become personal. The classical music grew louder as Rodriguez and Walsh moved deeper into the Whitmore mansion. Each step on the creaking floorboards seemed to echo the rhythm of a waltz, as if the house itself was dancing to some macabre tune. Rodriguez's hand instinctively moved to her service weapon as shadows flickered in the candlelight ahead. Detective Rodriguez, a cultured voice called out from the darkness. "I've been expecting you." A figure emerged from behind a grand staircase, tall, gaunt, wearing an immaculate Victorian-era suit that looked like it belonged in a museum. His pale skin seemed to glow in the candlelight, and his eyes held the fervor of someone who had crossed the line between passion and madness. "Allow me to introduce myself properly," he said with an elegant bow. Dr. Vincent Ashworth, former curator of the Metropolitan Museum's Antiquities Department. Though I suppose you could call me Edmund Whitmore's successor. Rodriguez kept her weapon trained on him while Walsh circled around to cut off any escape routes. "Dr. Ashworth, you're under arrest for the murders of Alexander Hartwell, Margaret Chin, James Morrison, and Thomas Blackwood." Ashworth laughed, a sound like breaking glass. "Murders? Detective, you misunderstand my work entirely. I'm an artist. A preservationist. Those people were destroying something beautiful by scattering Edmund's collection to the winds." "You see," Ashworth continued, gesturing to the empty room around them, "Edmund Whitmore spent 60 years building the most exquisite collection of music boxes ever assembled. Each piece was carefully chosen, lovingly maintained, perfectly preserved. And then those collectors came to his estate sale like vultures, tearing apart a masterpiece for their own selfish desires. Walsh had positioned himself behind Ashworth, but the killer seemed unconcerned. He was too focused on explaining his twisted philosophy to Detective Rodriguez. I worked with Edmund for 20 years before his death. I understood his vision. Beauty must be preserved, Detective. It must be protected from those who would corrupt it or scatter it to the winds. Rodriguez realized that Ashworth wasn't just a killer, he was completely delusional, believing his murders were acts of artistic preservation. She needed to keep him talking while Walsh got into position. "So you killed them to get the music boxes back?" she asked. "I liberated them," Ashworth corrected. "And I gave those collectors something far more valuable than they could have imagined: eternal beauty. They became part of the collection, frozen in perfect peace, surrounded by the music they claimed to love." The music boxes around the room suddenly sprang to life, their haunting melodies filling the air. Rodriguez noticed with horror that some of the tiny dancers bore faces that looked disturbingly familiar, faces of the victims. "You've been very helpful, Detective," Ashworth said, pulling out an ornate syringe filled with clear liquid. "Your investigation led you exactly where I wanted you to be. You see, I need one final piece for my collection, someone who truly appreciates the hunt, the mystery, the art of preservation." Rodriguez realized they had walked into a trap. The journal, the workshop, the fresh tire tracks, all of it had been deliberately left for them to find. Ashworth had been orchestrating this confrontation from the beginning. "The paralytic agent will keep you conscious but immobile," he explained conversationally. "You'll have hours to appreciate the beauty of what I've created before your heart finally stops from the sheer terror of understanding true art." As Ashworth lunged forward with the syringe, Rodriguez dove to the side, her training kicking in. The music boxes played faster, their melodies becoming discordant and frantic. Walsh emerged from the shadows, tackling Ashworth from behind. The syringe flew across the room, shattering against the wall. Ashworth fought with surprising strength, his obsession giving him an almost supernatural determination. But he was no match for two trained detectives. "The collection," he screamed as Walsh pinned him to the floor. "You don't understand. Beauty must be preserved. It must be protected." As Rodriguez cuffed Ashworth, she noticed something that would haunt her for years to come. In the flickering candlelight, she could see into the mansion's other rooms, and they weren't as empty as they had first appeared. More music boxes. Dozens of them. And in each one, tiny figures that looked far too realistic to be mere mechanical dancers. "Detective," Ashworth whispered as she read him his rights, "you still don't understand what you've destroyed. But you will. When you see what's in the basement, you'll understand that some collections are worth killing for." The real horror was just beginning. Against every instinct screaming at her to wait for backup, Rodriguez descended into the Whitmore mansion's basement while Walsh secured Ashworth upstairs. What she found there would require years of therapy to process and would change how she viewed the case entirely. The basement had been converted into a workshop that looked like something from a Victorian-era dollmaker's nightmare. Workbenches lined the walls, covered with tiny tools, paints, and materials for crafting miniature figures. But it was the dozens of completed music boxes arranged on shelves that made Rodriguez's blood turn to ice. Each music box contained figures that weren't mechanical at all, they were perfectly preserved human remains, shrunk down through some horrific process that Ashworth had perfected over decades. Rodriguez's flashlight beam revealed a journal lying open on the main workbench. Ashworth's meticulous handwriting detailed a process he called eternal preservation, a combination of advanced chemistry and surgical precision that allowed him to preserve human tissue indefinitely while reducing it to miniature size. The journal entries went back 15 years. 15 years of victims whose disappearances had never been connected because Ashworth had been so careful, so methodical. Homeless people, drifters, anyone whose absence wouldn't be immediately noticed. But the recent murders were different. They were his masterpiece, his attempt to reunite Edmund Whitmore's scattered collection by making the collectors themselves part of it. As Rodriguez read through the journal, a chilling psychological profile emerged. Dr. Vincent Ashworth hadn't just been Edmund Whitmore's colleague, he had been obsessively in love with him. When Whitmore died and his collection was sold off, Ashworth's grief had twisted into something monstrous. He believed that by preserving people in the same way Whitmore had preserved his antiques, he could somehow bring his mentor back to life. Each victim was chosen not just for their connection to the collection, but for qualities that reminded Ashworth of Whitmore himself. I know this is disturbing content, but it's important to understand how obsession can twist the human mind into something unrecognizable. If you're still with me, hit that like button to show your support for true crime content that doesn't shy away from the psychological complexity of these cases. The most horrifying discovery came when Rodriguez found Ashworth's plans for his grand finale. He had been planning to preserve not just the 4 collectors, but Detective Rodriguez herself, believing that her dedication to solving the case made her worthy of eternal preservation. In his twisted mind, Rodriguez represented the perfect audience for his art, someone who could appreciate the complexity and beauty of what he had created. He had been manipulating the investigation from the beginning, leaving clues that would lead her exactly where he wanted her to be. Walsh's voice crackled through Rodriguez's radio. "Maria, we've got a problem up here." Ashworth's escaped. The basement suddenly plunged into darkness as the power was cut. In the blackness, Rodriguez could hear the mechanical sounds of dozens of music boxes beginning to play simultaneously. But now she knew the truth, those weren't mechanical sounds at all. They were the preserved remains of Ashworth's victims, still somehow conscious, still trying to scream. Rodriguez fought her way through the darkness, using her flashlight to navigate between the horrific displays. Behind her, she could hear Ashworth's voice calling out, "Detective! You can't leave now. You haven't seen the most beautiful piece in my collection." Rodriguez reached the basement stairs just as Ashworth appeared at the top, silhouetted against the candlelight from the main floor. In his hands was another syringe, and his eyes held the desperate fury of someone whose life's work was being destroyed. "You don't understand art," he screamed, lunging down the stairs toward her. "You don't understand preservation. Beauty must be eternal." Rodriguez drew her weapon and fired 3 shots center mass. Ashworth tumbled down the stairs, the syringe shattering on the stone floor. As he lay dying, his final words were a whisper: "The collection must be complete." The music boxes fell silent one by one, as if the death of their creator had finally released their trapped souls. The Whitmore mansion was sealed off as a crime scene for 6 months while forensic teams cataloged the horror that Dr. Vincent Ashworth had created. In total, they discovered the preserved remains of 43 victims spanning 15 years, people whose disappearances had never been connected until now. Detective Rodriguez was placed on administrative leave for 3 months to recover from the psychological trauma of the case. She eventually returned to duty but requested a transfer to the fraud division, unable to handle violent crimes after what she had witnessed in that basement. The families of Ashworth's recent victims, Dr. Hartwell, Margaret Chin, James Morrison, and Thomas Blackwood, finally had answers, though the truth was more horrific than anyone could have imagined. The music boxes stolen from their homes were returned to their estates, though most family members chose to have them destroyed rather than keep them as reminders. The Whitmore mansion was demolished 6 months after the investigation concluded. The city council voted unanimously to turn the property into a memorial garden for Ashworth's victims, ensuring that the site of so much horror could become a place of peace and remembrance. This case changed how law enforcement approaches missing persons investigations, particularly those involving transient populations. The Ashworth Protocol now requires cross-referencing disappearances with local collectors, museums, and antique dealers to identify potential patterns that might otherwise go unnoticed. Dr. Vincent Ashworth's twisted legacy serves as a reminder that obsession, when left unchecked, can transform even the most educated and cultured individuals into monsters. His belief that beauty must be preserved at any cost led to decades of unimaginable suffering. If this case has left you as disturbed as it left me, please take a moment to hit that like button and subscribe to the channel. Your support helps me continue investigating these complex cases that reveal the darkest aspects of human psychology. What did you think of this case? Have you ever encountered someone whose collecting hobby seemed to cross the line into unhealthy obsession? Share your thoughts in the comments below. I read every single one. Next week, I'll be covering another case of obsession gone wrong, the story of a rare book collector whose desire to own a one-of-a-kind manuscript led to kidnapping, extortion, and murder. Make sure you have notifications turned on so you don't miss it. Until then, remember that the line between passion and obsession is thinner than most people realize. Sometimes the most dangerous predators are hiding behind the facade of culture and sophistication. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next video.